that, I wanted to hear from you whether or not the recent travel advisory from the CDC on Belize's COVID situation has had any impact, and maybe you can share what members are reporting are some of the primary questions that tourists are asking before they book.
To answer your first question, Marlene, if you look at those CDC warnings, I think the same level of warning that they've given to Belize is probably identical to maybe 150 other countries.
That's right.
So I don't think that has much effect.
Yeah.
I think the real question is, to what extent are Americans, and really that's what our market is boiling down to, Canada has such tight returning restrictions, Canada's off the map pretty much until that policy is changed. The question is, how willing are Americans to get on an airplane to travel? That really is the ultimate question. And the difference between traveling domestically in the United States and internationally. And I think that's where, when we raise this question about ease of entry into Belize, if you're a potential tourist who has gotten over the hurdle of fear of flying, so once that person says, all right, I'm either vaccinated or I've COVID already, so I'm not fearful of getting on an airplane. The question is, well, where should I go? Do I go to Mexico, which has no restrictions, Costa Rica that has no restrictions, St. Lucia, which has less restrictive entry requirements than Belize? In other words, visitors have a choice. And I'm not saying that we necessarily get in a race to the bottom or we stop testing like Mexico does. What I'm saying is we have to be constantly aware of the competitiveness of this market and enact regulations that are common sense. Yeah. That's all we're saying. Regulations don't mean anything, don't get us anywhere. Testing policy that doesn't really get to the root of the problem doesn't get us anywhere. And what we're asking, and this is a process that has to be under constant review.
Let me ask you a
what
quick
about,
question.
I was going to follow up on this one. So
Go ahead.
There still is the gold standard certification that is necessary for people to be able to visit your hotel or your institution. You quite rightly noted that all of these restrictions were devised at a time when we didn't have active COVID cases, and so we were trying to prevent the entrance through the tourists that were coming in. The context has changed, we know that. Should it not also then be a part of the consideration that the certification of hotels not necessarily be something that qualifies you to be able to take in tourists or to take tourists on tours?
You've answered your own question, Marlene, or you've asked it as a leading question. You teed that one up for me. There was a time when the gold standard concept and the safe corridor concept, which we did not originate that several countries started that long before we did. My feeling is that concept has probably outlived its usefulness, and the whole nature of the virus globally has changed. It's really the concept of nationalism and that every country has its own policy is not so effective anymore, because this virus is throughout the whole world. Even places that were only a few months ago considered pretty much free of the virus, having major outbreaks of it. So, the main thing is that all of us all over the world, Belizeans and tourists, there is almost no need for a distinction between our local citizens and the visitors that come to our country. So this effort to isolate them and separate them, which even from the beginning never made a whole lot of sense, certainly makes much less sense now. The thrust needs to be on having all of us in Belize, whether you just got off the airplane or whether you just got out of bed here in Belize, we've got to follow the science. Wear the mask, keep a distance, monitor your own self in terms of how you're feeling that day. These are things that the scientists have been telling us for, what, 9 or 10 months now? That's the only way that this virus is going to be conquered. And there's a long way to go before the vaccine takes effect, and we still don't really know what the result of that is going to be. So nothing is inevitable here. We have to be aware at all times. So whether, you know, I feel very bad because I think independent restaurants or operators have been, and small hotels that have not been able to reach the gold standard for many different reasons. Sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's just institutional capabilities. Okay, for whatever reason, they have been unfortunately handicapped, and I think we need to take steps to get our independent restaurants and smaller hotels and tour operators. It doesn't mean they get a free pass, but a lot of the gold standard requirements do not really have anything to do with minimizing the spread of the virus. They have to do with things like record keeping and stuff like that the average small operator really can't comply with.
Well, I'm glad that you're raising that as a talking point here, because when you look at what the previous administration put into place in terms of getting all of these hotels and businesses up to scratch regarding the gold standard, and those who were not eligible or did not qualify, and those who spent a lot of money qualifying themselves, and the fact that we're still only a trickle in terms of those who are coming in as visitors, that's a significant economic impact on any small business or any medium business for that matter, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the cost of one electronic thermometer, it's around $150. Of hotels, you need at least 2, probably 3 of those. So that right there. But the point I'm trying to make, Isani, is that people all over the world are aware of the virus and knows what they have to do. People do have their own free will. So if you're a visitor or if you're a Belizean, you want to go out to dinner. Now, if you go to a place and there's no signage that says wash your hands or social distance, there's no basin or nearby bathroom that you can wash up, there's no hand sanitizer around. I mean, come on. Knowing what you know, are you really going to go eat at that restaurant that obviously does not care about your health? You walk into the place and the servers are not wearing masks and the bartender is not wearing a mask. Do you really want to go have a drink at that place? I mean, at some point, the onus for protection of your health has to be on you.
Yeah.
So whether the place has a gold standard sign on it or not is not the only indicator of how safe you are at that particular restaurant or small hotel or whatever. So I think we need to start exercising a little bit more common sense when it comes to those standards.